19 soldiers were killed before breakfast on a September morning. The men responsible were already back across the border before India had finished counting its dead. The question was not whether India would respond. The question was whether the response would be something that could be announced to the world, or something that would only be spoken about in rooms most people never enter. The answer came 11 days later, in the dark, from a direction nobody expected. The story began more than a year before the attack, on the morning of June 4, 2015, in the forests of Manipur. A convoy of Indian soldiers was moving through the jungle, and one of the men was singing in the back of the truck. Then the front tire burst, the driver was shot, and the ambush came from both sides of the road at once. Before anyone could respond, a detonation destroyed the bus. 18 soldiers were killed. The militants responsible crossed into Myanmar before the army could pursue them. 5 days later, Indian special forces boarded helicopters, crossed the border, found the camp, and struck it. The operation was clean and deliberate. They marked their success with pink smoke rising above the trees and came home. Nobody outside the military knew it had happened. Major Vihan Singh Shergill was among the officers involved. At the dinner that followed, his superiors pulled him aside and told him he was being transferred to Army headquarters in Delhi. His work had been noted, but there was also a personal situation that required attention. His mother was deteriorating. She was deep into Alzheimer's disease, and the progression was getting harder to manage from a distance. On his first evening back home, she asked him not to be put in a hospital, in a clear and direct way that told him she had been holding on to that request for some time. He promised her she would not be. He arranged for a nurse, briefed the woman carefully on every habit and medication, and tried to believe it was enough. His sister and her husband Karan lived nearby, and helped where they could. Karan was an Air Force officer stationed at a Delhi base, and the two men had the particular ease of people who understood each other's work without explanation. There were evenings when the extended family gathered, ate together, and laughed about things from years earlier, and on those evenings the war felt like it belonged to somebody else's life. But the small moments of normalcy were becoming harder to hold. One night Vihan came home and could not find his mother. The nurse told him she was sleeping. She was not in her room. He and his sister went into the street, and the nurse stopped them and explained that she had placed a GPS tracker in every piece of clothing his mother owned, because she was also an agent and this was her job. The team located his mother standing on a nearby bridge. She came home safely and sat back in her chair, and Vihan sat across from her and tried to slow his breathing. After the Myanmar operation, the families of Special Forces soldiers were placed under quiet surveillance as a precaution. Terrorists had begun gathering information about the people connected to the men who had crossed the border, and the army was not willing to leave those families unprotected. At headquarters, the war room was absorbing bad news at a pace that was difficult to process. Militants were crossing the line of control regularly. A Pakistani strategy of bleeding India through relentless small strikes had been identified and discussed at senior levels. Civilian casualties were rising. The people coordinating the attacks were doing so from positions inside Pakistan-occupied Kashmir with increasing confidence, as though they had calculated that no response would ever reach them. Vihan worked alongside a colleague named Sirat, a pilot who had lost her husband in service. She had joined the operation with one purpose in mind: to prove to his memory that she was as capable and committed as he had believed her to be. Vihan understood that kind of motivation without needing to ask about it. Everything changed on the morning of September 18, 2016. 4 militants crossed the line of control before dawn and entered the Indian Army Brigade headquarters at Uri, wearing the same uniform as the soldiers they intended to kill. They moved through the base without raising an alarm. They entered the canteen and killed the cook. Then they spread across the camp, poured fuel across the ground, and threw grenades into the structures where soldiers were still sleeping. The base erupted within minutes. Karan was already awake when the attack started. He gathered his team and moved toward the militants, ordering his men to cover him as he advanced. He located one of the attackers, shot him, and picked up the man's weapon. The weapon was connected to explosives. 19 soldiers were killed that morning. Karan was among them. The funerals that followed were attended by families who held themselves together at a cost that only they fully understood. Karan's pregnant wife stood at his coffin without breaking. His daughter, barely old enough to understand what a coffin was, raised her hand in a salute. That image moved through the country by the end of the day, and the grief it carried was not the kind that settled quickly. Vihan stood at the graveside and cried without trying to stop himself. At the Army War Room, senior officers made a decision that was stated clearly and without sentiment. India would not wait for direction from international bodies. It would not seek permission. The response would target the launch pads inside Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, from which militants were being trained, equipped, and sent across the border. Nothing more and nothing less. The plan was a surgical strike. It would be executed in 10 days. A few evenings after the funeral, one of Karan's fellow soldiers came to Vihan's door. He brought Karan's wristwatch, cracked from the explosion, and talked about the kind of soldier Karan had been and the decisions he had made in his final minutes. Before leaving, he said that Vihan's experience and contacts might prove useful in what was coming. His sister had been standing in the hallway the whole time, holding Karan's uniform in her arms, and when the door closed, she let herself fall apart completely. Vihan held her and said nothing. The next morning, he walked into his commanding officer's office and asked to be placed on the mission. He made his case, and he made the promise that every soldier who crossed the border would come home alive. His request was approved. The operation required 7 launch pads to be hit simultaneously by 3 separate teams. Each team would destroy 2 locations, with the final target assigned as the primary objective. The precision of the timing was not negotiable. If any team moved early or late, the entire element of surprise across all 7 locations was compromised. Vihan assembled his team and began training. He allowed them to contact their families under the cover of a routine exercise, then collected their phones before the operational details were shared. He named Sirat as the operations pilot, knowing what the mission meant to her. The intelligence side was being handled by an officer named Jasmine. Her team intercepted a phone call from inside Pakistan in which an official, believing he was passing unremarkable numbers to a contact, transmitted what turned out to be location coordinates. 5 of the 7 launch pads were confirmed through that intercept. The remaining 2 were found through continued surveillance using a small unmanned device that an intern had built in the form of a bird. It flew at low altitude, carried 4 cameras, and could be controlled remotely from Delhi. The team deployed 4 of them across the target areas to gather visual confirmation. At one location, a guard picked the device up and turned it over in his hands while the operators in Delhi watched without breathing. Then it flew again. 2 men connected to the Uri attack were arrested and brought in for interrogation. The first refused to speak. Vihan attended the session and applied enough pressure to change that decision. The man gave up the names of the planners behind the attack. They were called Idris and Jabbar. He also revealed the existence of underground caves and tunnels that the militants used to move between positions without being visible from above. That detail was filed and would matter more than anyone knew at the time. On the Pakistani side, Indian agents had been quietly working to neutralize a war room official whose position gave him the authority to activate the country's aerial radar defense. The plan was to remove him from duty on the night of the strike, without anyone realizing it had been deliberate. 2 agents took him to dinner and ensured he was in no condition to be making decisions by the time the helicopters were in the air. All 7 locations confirmed. Strike set for 2 in the morning. The evening before the operation, the commander reminded Vihan of the promise he had made. Vihan answered that every soldier on the team would be sitting at a dinner table together on September 30th. The helicopters lifted off in the early hours carrying all 3 teams, with the technical operations running from Delhi. Everything was on schedule. 8 hours to the objective. Then Pakistan's aerial radar system came online. The agents who had been tasked with neutralizing the war room official had not been fully successful. Someone else had activated the system. The radar was capable of detecting movement at low altitude across the border, and the helicopters were now within range of detection. The call came through to abort. Vihan ordered the pilot to turn around. In the dark of the helicopter, he thought about Karan. He thought about the interrogation and the caves running beneath the terrain that no surface radar could see. He thought about what it meant to approach entirely underground. He got back on the channel with the operations room and laid out the alternative. Instead of the air route, the teams would enter on foot through the cave network. The bird device would fly ahead of them and serve as their eyes on the ground. Govind, the head of the war room, redirected the intern to guide the device over the cave entry points in real time. The teams landed, dismounted, and entered the caves. The drone moved ahead of them through the dark, and the intern watched the feed from Delhi. When the cameras picked up figures sitting in a passage ahead of the soldiers, the team was warned before the figures could see them. They were taken down without a sound, and the teams kept moving forward. All 3 teams emerged on the other side and moved toward their assigned locations. Vihan's team reached the first target in the forest. The entrance gate had an alarm wired to a mechanism. One soldier disabled it without triggering it. A second gate required the same careful work. The team moved inside and spread through the building in near silence until a single shot broke it open. The firefight was fast and close. The Indian soldiers worked through the building with the precision of people who had studied the layout until it was part of their thinking. When it was done, they set the compound on fire and withdrew. The first location was destroyed. At the same time, the other 2 teams were working through their assigned targets with equal efficiency. Across the border, while the operations were running, The Pakistani war room official who had been taken to dinner was being quietly transported home, the agents maintaining the fiction of an ordinary evening while the strikes unfolded around them. Vihan's team crossed a bridge and moved through a quiet residential area toward the second location with the lights of the neighborhood cut out around them. They reached the building, cut the wires on the alarm, opened the gate, and pushed through. Part of the team climbed the exterior stairs to the upper floor, while the others moved through the ground level. They were nearly finished when a single gunshot broke the silence, and the building came alive. The exchange of fire inside was intense. The Indian side had studied the layout through the surveillance footage and used that knowledge to move faster than the defense could organize. When one of the militants tried to escape through a window, the soldiers outside caught him before he hit the ground. Vihan questioned the man about where Idris was located. The man resisted until the questioning became something the man was not willing to continue enduring. He gave a direction. Vihan moved through the building and shot out every security camera he found as he went. In one room, he encountered a child holding a weapon, shaking, unable to make a decision. He lowered his own gun, made his choice in less than a second, and shut the door behind him when he left. The local police had been tipped off by someone inside the area, and vehicles were already moving toward the compound. The team informed Vihan. He told them to hold and kept going. Idris was in a room at the back of the building. He had heard something that did not feel right, and fired through his own door without opening it. Nothing answered from the corridor. Vihan came through the window. The fight that followed was not clean or tactical. It was two men who both understood exactly what the moment meant, and neither of them was willing to stop. Vihan took serious punishment before he found the knife. He pressed it in until there was nothing left to press against. He called the intern and told him the team needed an exit route. The police were close now. The bird guided the team through the back of the compound and into the tree line. They moved through the woods as Pakistani air assets came online above them. The team pressed against rocks and used the terrain, and kept still while searchlights moved over the ground around them. Vihan gave the order to Sirat. She had one shot. She took it cleanly, and the Pakistani helicopter went down. The signal from the operations room cut out. Delhi went completely silent. Then it came back. Vihan gave his status. The other two teams checked in. All 7 locations had been destroyed. All 3 teams were moving toward extraction. Nobody had been lost. The soldiers came out of the cave on the Indian side as the sky was beginning to change color. Govind stood in the operations room and began making calls. The news moved through the channels that needed it. September 29, 2016 was later designated Surgical Strike Day. Pakistan denied it had happened. At the airbase, Jasmine stood on the tarmac and watched the sky until she saw the helicopter she was waiting for. When Vihan stepped down, they looked at each other the way people do after surviving something that cannot fully be explained to anyone who was not part of it. Sirat and Jasmine exchanged a handshake that carried everything neither woman said aloud. Vihan drove home. His sister was at the door before the car had stopped. His niece grabbed his leg and refused to release it. He went inside and found his mother in her chair, and he knelt in front of her the way he always did, at her eye level, and waited. She looked at his face carefully. She was trying to locate something. The disease had been slowly moving further away from her. Then she said his name. He kissed her hand. On September 30th, the date he had promised, a dinner was held at which every soldier and every intelligence officer involved in the operation was present. The table was full and loud and ran well past the time anyone had planned for. The Uri attack of September 18, 2016 was real. 19 soldiers were killed at an army brigade headquarters by militants who crossed from Pakistani territory. 11 days later, Indian Special Forces crossed the line of control and struck the launch pads responsible. No Indian casualties were reported. The strikes were publicly announced by the Indian government, which was itself unusual for a cross-border operation of this kind. The soldiers who went across were never named. The film gave them names and families, and a mother losing her memory 1 week at a time, and a cracked watch belonging to a man who ran toward an armed explosive because stopping it was more important than surviving it. And that was how 19 coffins became an answer that crossed a border in the dark and came home before sunrise, carrying every soldier who went.